It is finally time. But hello everyone, it's me, Connor from Seafoam Gaming back again with the final episode of Season 3 of Eternal Memories. It's been a long time coming. This episode's had the most development of any episode I've ever made. Like you may say, oh yeah, the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon episode's taking a while, but those I deliberately hold back. Like there are periods where I don't work on it on purpose. But when I work on it, I usually get them done relatively smoothly, except for that third episode because the whole newness to my format. But no, this episode was the hardest I've ever made, and it's because life has been hell. I graduated college, then lost a job that I got for the first time ever, then the whole virus hit and I had to deal with a ground and didn't believe in it, and I had to deal with all sorts of scariness in the world and just uncertainty, and then I got busy and stressed, and now that I took a Twitter break and am finally unstressed, and getting back to my routine of working, I have finally completed a script for the final episode of Eternal Memories Season 3, and now I'm able to talk about Castlevania The Adventure. The last time we left off on record, I think I hinted at this episode, or outright said it, and yeah, I'm covering this episode. It's a given and it's been my plan since the beginning of the season when I covered Rebirth, which was a fantastic game and a good start to Season 3 I felt. But this game, well, is infamously bad for obvious reasons, but it's also one that's kind of just not well made, and I want to analyze on why that is, and even for the time of being an early Game Boy game, it's not that great. Because I have a lot of memories with this, as it was my first major Castlevania game, so that's actually kind of embarrassing, but also important because it at least lets me know where I stood on the matter and has an experience getting into a franchise with arguably one of the worst games in the whole series. But yeah, this is the final episode of Season 3, and before we get into the whole history of how I got into the series and game, might as well clarify some stuff, like how, yeah, it's been a while, I mentioned why, and in non-scripted memories I've been mentioning that too as I get back to speed, but overall it's just been a long bumpy road, and I've been playing out Season 4. I got some ideas planned. Only a few things are finalized, but I'm going to do another bit of revamping to polish it up. So I was debating whether to make this just Season 4, but non-name, or make this like Season 3 and save the stuff for Season 4 and maybe do that later this summer so that it feels more like a proper season. But either way, on to Castlevania The Adventure, and why it's a pretty terrible game if I'm honest.
For me, my experience with the Castlevania series began in mid-2012. I mentioned that the 3DS was my gateway to a bunch of new franchises, and Castlevania was no exception. However, while Adventure was the first game in the series to be released on the 3DS, it wasn't the first that was announced, since Castlevania Mirror of Fate was announced at that year's E3, and it was basically the return of Castlevania to Nintendo systems after a brief hiatus being on other consoles as part of the Lord of Shadow series. Though this still was part of Lord of Shadow series, and that is still not a good series, but hey, at least we're getting a new game on Nintendo systems, which is more than we can say today. As noted in other episodes, I didn't really play many third-party franchises before the 3DS came out, so that system was my chance to get introduced to a lot of them for the first time ever. Mirror of Fate was what I was going to plan on being the game to do that for Castlevania, but then I learned a nasty little detail about it that it was rated M for mature. I, a 14-year-old, had no freaking idea how a 2D platformer could possibly under M rating at the time. Since I was 3 years away from turning 17, I didn't want to get the game when I was underage. So I figured it was some blasphemous attempt to ruin Castlevania and make it all edgy, since I swore that the NES and Super Nintendo games were E for everyone. Well, they mostly were, but I didn't know at the time that PS2 Castlevanias were one of the first to get the M rating in the series, and also the first Lord of Shadows got the M rating as well. Nearly all the Game Boy Advance and NES games would also get a T rating, so Castlevania wasn't even a kid franchise to begin with, despite me thinking it was back then at least. But still, I want to get into Castlevania somehow because I like retro games and was growing fond of them. Since I managed to do just that with Mega Man Leo prior, along with some other series like Adventure Island and Double Dragon which were Game Boy ports, I didn't want to dig out my Wii for the older games that were on the service, so I decided to wait and see if the Game Boy trilogy would hit the eShop. mainly due to good word of mouth about Castlevania 2, and some people saying Legends is a hidden gem. Little did I know that later in 2012, that would happen indeed, when Dracula Densetsu launched in the Japanese eShop, followed very shortly after by a North American release date. Castlevania The Adventure was coming to 3DS Virtual Console on October 25th, 2012, and that was the day to remember, as I was very eagerly anticipating playing my first ever Castlevania title. Not only was it a safe game as an E4Everyone title, at least by my standards, but it was also just a Game Boy game in a small sea of NES titles that were flooding the eShop at the time, making me confident that just because NES games were getting added to the service, that didn't mean the Game Boy line would also die. At least that's what I foolishly hoped, because Castlevania The Adventure would be the final Game Boy game on the Virtual Console, not counting Mega Man games or the Pokemon games they release as special little bonuses later. No, in terms of traditional weekly random releases, The Adventure was the final adventure for the Game Boy Virtual Console, so what a weird way to go out on. While I waited for the North American launch of the game, I was actually in the middle of taking some Tai Chi courses. You see, Tai Chi is a weird form of balancing, and for some stupid reason, Kid Me assumed I could get a cool model sword by taking the lead of classes. Since the local Tai Chi building had it on display, it was next to my grandma's bowling alley, I visited all the time, and I popped by the Tai Chi place one day, looking to see what people were doing, saw a cool sword, and I was like, wow, I could own a sword! So I decided to take Tai Chi in order to get a sword. I was dead wrong, and within a few months of practicing, I hated the exercises. Long, drawn-out stretches, deep breathing, I wasn't into any of that at all. I was more of an action teen, ready to do walks and more outgoing activities like kickball, jungle gyms, and the little bit of baseball I was allowed to play in the gym. I also learned that I would need at least 5 or so years of Tai Chi experience to be deemed worthy of the sword, so I just wanted out at the as soon as possible. This was around early 2011, I believe, when I found out that it wasn't what I wanted, and I didn't even get my wish, unfortunately. Because my grandma saw that it was good for my balancing, so she enforced that I stick to the plan the entire time, week after week on Wednesdays and Thursdays later on, with no way getting out of it. It was the thing I'd take off from when I went to my vacation cabin this summer, but otherwise it was an immediate process I do after school every Thursday without fail. The reason I bring this up now is because around the time October 2012 rolled around, I finally mastered enough Tai Chi balancing to stand on one toe, so I was allowed to persuade Grandma to stop burning money on crappy lessons I only wanted for a cool prop that I was years away from getting, to the point I just gave up on it. While I don't remember the very same day I quit the whole program for good, I do know for a fact that October 25th was one of my final lessons, as the moment I was free from the exercises for the night, I washed up my bedroom, used my grandma's credit card, and bought Castlevania The Adventure off the 3DS eShop. Finally, I'd be able to get into this beloved franchise with a cool Game Boy game just like I got into Mega Man, so why not Castlevania? Surely the Game Boy game would be just as fun as the wheel... well, no. I'm just gonna stop myself, because that was my first mistake. While I heard about some of the earlier games via the Angry Video Game Nerd, mostly the NES through N64 games, I didn't know much about Adventure's reputation, only that of a sequel through rumblings on Nintendo Life. So lo and behold, I start the game for the first time ever and deal with this, the slow-paced walking. Good God! Even back then I knew it felt off. It didn't seem like aiming like the other platformers I played on the Game Boy, but this Castlevania game was just slow as molasses. I had a whip I could use to beat up enemies, I could upgrade with ball pickups, only to immediately lose them when I got hit. Needless to say, I spammed restore points from the onset for this one, but I was still in disbelief. All that hype I built up for a series I heard so many good things about, only for a slow, boring game that wasn't like anything I had hoped. Wasn't even like I didn't enjoy Konami Game Boy games at the time either, because I loved playing Quarf and Mystical Ninja the months prior to this. But this game? This was just a travesty. Even after beating the game with save states, I just felt the same as I did when I started up. No soul, enjoyment, or really any idea what was going on whatsoever. You really have to understand that even with me knowing way more about the Castlevania franchise and playing every other Castlevania known to man save for Legends, I still consider Adventure to be the least enjoyable of them all, hands down. Yes, even more than Haunted Castle the arcade game, since I actually find that game a bit of fun when I can get some enjoyment out of it. I already mentioned the slow speed of Adventure. which is a thing here because they didn't want the Game Boy to blur like crazy from fast-moving sprites, but they could have still done a much better job to make the game better balanced and more fun around it. So on to the stages and describing what they are, everything this game has to offer, and why I just don't think I stuck with it back then. So here, in the first stage, it doesn't look that bad. You got the basic controls, not many enemies, and some good time to adapt to the gameplay. Dumb power-up system aside, you'll be forgiven for thinking it might have been a good third entry in the series, since this did come out right before Castlevania 3. Unfortunately, the slowness isn't the only reason why this game is a disaster, as the level design is just horrific beyond belief, which is honestly kinda surprising, since this first level is still pretty solid for what it's worth. You have a bunch of eyeballs flooding the stage for some reason, and if you're clever enough, you can even find a secret area with some goodies. But then you get to the stupid part where you have to jump from the extreme edge of a platform many times in a row. It doesn't help that there are these bats that will knock you down to the floor below, and while it doesn't kill or harm you in any way, it's just still a waste of time, since you have to go all the way back, do the platforms again, and repeat until you get across the whole long nonsense. Once you finally make it past that part from hell, you encounter the first boss battle of the game, this armor guy. He's pretty easy, but you'll notice right away that the hitboxes in this game are all sorts of weird. Even when you dink you away from the giant sprite, you can still get hurt by his hook attack from a good distance. It's very aggravating, but it's a breather boss compared to what's up next. So now that we're on to stage 2, it might be worth noting that I could never ever get past this whenever I would replay the game without save states. I just get bored and quit. So why did I always drop the game to stage? Surely there's 6 or 9 stages to go through, so this one wouldn't be that bad, right? Well, that's not the case. Not only do we only get 4 stages in the entire game, meaning this is the halfway point, believe it or not, this stage begins to show the worst of the game's level design. Yes, we made it through a decent level and are already in hell. So the main reason I dropped the game here is because it's boring. Even though the stage has some bullshit parts I'll get to later, I just never felt the same energy I had to try and beat the stage like the way I did with the first. Mainly due to the lack of the epic music that played in the first stage, and now stage 2 just sounds boring now. So now you get this generic cave theme that really sucks. The next reason comes from the sparse checkpoints we found here. There's some really stupid parts with some more extreme edge jumping, and if you die there, you get sent back to the beginning of the stage. But don't think that you're in the clear if you made it just past that, because the midpoint is where the dumbest part of the whole stage is. Remember the eyeballs from level 1 I talked about? They're back, and this time, they will destroy the bridge you're crossing and force you to make more extreme edge jumps once again. How you beat these horrifying creatures and get over these pits without falling to your death? Despite many game overs as a teen on this segment due to me not figuring out what to do, I now learned recently on a stream that the best strategy is none other than to ignore the eyeballs. I'm serious. If you just ignore the eyeballs and jump over them, you'll be better off taking damage from them than getting instantly killed by falling down the blown up bridge. It seems like the concept that would work in any other game that didn't control so slowly and wasn't just bad, but this is the adventure, and blown up bridges are too much for this game to handle. So when you get to the end of the stage, what's the epic boss fight now? None other than an army of frogs. Yes, my arch nemesis Greninja has sent his army of frogmen to stop me from shilling Delphox as the best star Pokemon, and these frogs are just wimpy enemies for the role of taking too long to pop out the holes to kill. They really don't even do anything except be an enemy mob. It's not even a proper boss fight. It somehow it's more boring than when Gradius does these enemy waves. On to stage 3, where hell is in true incarnate. The stage that would make any dude whip out this Game Boy cartridge and run over it with a car is this very stage, and it's because it's part auto-scroller. Yes, a slow as molasses game has an auto-scroller, and instant death spikes everywhere. This is the point that no matter what, without fail, even in the miracle I beat the second stage without cheating and got here, I would always lose save states or reset the game. The fact that the stage is so incredibly long, the checkpoint gaps are really big and long, makes the stage just a total nightmare. And I wouldn't be surprised if 8% of the people who played this in 1989 just rage quit the game here. Want to hear something even sadder about the stage and a memory I have with it? I had the honor of playing this very stage while I was on sedation. I am not making that up. When this game was included in the Castlevania collection last year, I imported it for my Switch due to the Castlevania 3 soundtrack and the difficulty adjustments in that game, so there was really no regional differences in the venture, but I still had to beat it anyway for sake of my backlog, whether I want to or not, since I want to beat all the stages. So before the dental visit, I made it to the dread stage 3 with save states before pausing and going to the dentist and getting them to drill a hole in my tooth to stop a cavity, since it was actually the first cavity I got since the 4 I had to remove at once when I was 8 years old. So they had to inject me in the mouth with a needle, numbing the pain before they would drill down and fill up my teeth, and once the deed was done, I was given my Switch back from my grandma, put in the car, and rolled home with my grandma. And then the effects of the drug started to kick in. So I started the Castlevania collection up, and then I played like this. This very clip you're seeing on screen right now, this is from that same car ride. Thank God the Switch has a capture tool, since you can see how awful the stage is played when someone is heavily sedated and can't even focus on anything going on around them. Shocking to say, but even when I'm at full mental capacity, the stage is still stupidly hard and easy to die in. For starters, you have to break down pillars that are raising the floor close to the spikes in the ceiling. Then, as the floor is lowering, you have to hustle to the other pillars before it would rise back up. Rinse and repeat with very strict jump timing, and you make it back to the rope segments. Be careful not to jump, or else you instantly die. And now that you're on the rope, it becomes a vertical auto-scroller. Joy! Now the death spikes are on the bottom, and you have to climb up to the top, in a game with slow jumping and slow climbing. And also, it'll eat your inputs at random, sending you to the doom if you're not precise enough or if the game hates you. When you finally get to the top, there's yet another auto-scroller, only this time with you jumping to the left, on even more tiny platforms. Rinse and repeat with another vertical segment, and eventually you reach the boss, who's actually pretty forgettable. If you had to whip upgrade from the save states, then he's a piece of cake, but otherwise it's just a slow fight like the first battle. And now we are already at the 4th and final stage. Yes! Just like that, the game goes back to the realm of reason with a giant castle stage with tons of screens to trek through, and all the enemies we've grown to hate. Speaking of which, here's the first boss as a standard enemy. Lay. And that is just a whole uninteresting trek. There's not much to do here, you just go around, beat up enemies, and make it to the end of the stage. So it's time for the end of the game already, with a final boss battle against Dracula. And I'll be honest, we have a fun fight here, easily the best designed one in the entire game that you can easily memorize and beat without cheating. Dracula has 2 forms, one being his vampire form with an easy to memorize pattern, along with his bat form. Honestly, this battle's when I found myself enjoying the most whenever I got there, and in my collection, I just saved the state before the credits solely so I can retry this and practice doing the whole battle in one go, since it's the best part of the game, and I don't want to play through the whole game just to see this, as there's no stage select called. With all the jank this game has, having any portion that was actually well made and feeling competent was shocking. It's just a shame that this is the final part of the game and it's not even worth dredging through the god-awful stage 3 and the boring stage 4 just to get to this point. But with Dracula destroyed, the castle falls apart, and Christopher looks apart from a distance before the credits roll with an eerie song. After it finishes, Christopher and the cliff vanish and a bat emerges from the destroyed castle, indicating the battle with Christopher is not over yet.
And that's it! Sedation, just the inability to get past stage 2 because I just got bored at that point over the years, and overall the weird journey that somehow made me a fan of the series anyway, and that's what my experience with Castlevania The Adventure is. Even when I beat it for footage and when I beat it for the collection last year, I didn't feel anything about beating it. It's just, the final boss battle is great as I said, and stage 1 is okay, but stage 2 is ahead and stage 3 is living hell, and I don't want to wish on anyone. I am not surprised that for Rebirth, people often ask, why is it considered a remake if they changed all the levels and everything but the one song? And my answer is they reimagined that game because if they directly took the levels in this game and polished them up and put them in the remake style, they wouldn't be good levels still. They just suck. Like all of them. Even the first stage sucks its own way. And I didn't even talk about 4th stage much because it's just a big labyrinth of rooms. And it's boring. It's not as infuriating as stage 3, but it's still pretty bad design. And thus we're ending Eternal Memories Season 3 on a low note, but one I deliberately chose. We gotta start high and low. That's how my life is, it seems. And also, it's a nice comparison from the first episode, where we got to see how amazing that game was as the final classic Castlevania game, and now this game is just bad and not good, and even for an early Game Boy game is not good. It's like, they made a Gradius game on the Game Boy not too long after this game, and you know it's also different and not the same as the NES ones. I find it better than the NES Gradius, and that should say something about how bad Castlevania the Adventure is. It could have been on the same par length as Simon's Quest at least, or better than the first game, but no, it's somehow worse than all of them. I'd rather play the bad US version of Castlevania 3 than this again. But with that, the season comes to an end. And I like to thank you for the patience. Normally when I film Eternal Memories, I do it out of passion and fun, and I do that because compared to my gameplay videos and my unboxings, no one seems to look at them, and this is like the PMD retrospective. And I'm gonna get back to that next season. I have scripts in the works. But I like focusing on other stuff and obscure stuff, and not many people watch it as a result, thanks to those who stick around, just share with their friends and whatnot. So maybe that, now I'm at 600 subs, I'm kind of surprised, we can hit 10,000 in some weird future, or more realistically, 1,000, so I can read that awful fanfic I mentioned in the Deviant episode. But yeah, Season 3 is ending, and I think I'm going to take a nap and prepare myself for Season 4. There will be a Season 4, I've made that clear several times. It's going to start with a passion that my grandparents like, and one that I've gone addicted to a bit too on the Switch. Next time, you'll see some pinball action.